Okay, so the famous Cyberathletics non-intro returns. Welcoming our second guest ever, Alex Lee of Digiday, who covers obviously gaming and esports at Digiday. Alex knows I think he's one of the best around, but let's not gush too much because I feel like I've done that a lot on this show and to you privately. But yeah, Alex is really good. I'm sure most people watching this already know Alex and read his work.
Yeah, it's a
what we're
pleasure to
talking
be here
about.
with you guys.
Yeah, man. Welcome.
Who's the first guest ever?
Dom Sacco, UK
Wow.
esports legend.
Yeah. Wow. I'm in esteemed company right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Honored.
Right, so what are we talking about? We're talking about a topic about which you, Alex, recently wrote a piece, which is essentially, I guess, kind of touching on the general state of media in esports. Because obviously, for those that don't know, Upcomer were recently acquired, and a couple of other enthusiast properties recently acquired by Gamers Group, who own Esports. And I guess notoriously, esports just doesn't pay very good freelance rates. I suppose it's pretty safe to say. Definitely not something, if you're a freelancer working, say, just for Dot, pretty much impossible to earn like a full-time living. And I guess your piece was about just the struggles the esports industry has had with low freelance rates and how that's, I guess, I don't want to say Dot is one of the worst culprits because I think they do pay better rates than a lot of places. So I remember the first freelance piece, the first piece I ever had published in esports and gaming was GamesBeat, VentureBeat, which was fuck all. It was literally zero. They just said we don't pay. But I did it anyway.
When was that?
That was late 2019, I think.
That's wild. That's wild.
And VentureBeat's a pretty significant outlet, so that's crazy in hindsight. But I was never going to say no to that because it was just the first one. It was the foot in the door. And I guess I'll let you kind of summarize your piece in a second, Alex. But I guess just to preface, you and I have kind of disagreed on on I guess what's considered fair in the industry, whether Dot and other outlets like Dot can pay higher than what they currently pay, whether it's possible. But yeah, I guess if you want to just summarize kind of what you wrote and your general angle with the piece, we can go from there.
Sure. And I think you're absolutely right. I want to just kind of lead off by saying that, well, my story was sort of had a news hook around gamers and its recent run of acquisitions and also a new funding round that it announced. Really, the crux of the story is that these are structural issues across the entire esports media industry, not something that gamers or any one company is specifically guilty of being like the big evil leader. So with that in mind, I wrote this general story around gamers for a couple of reasons. The first reason is just because I had access to a lot of former gamer staff. I've been writing about issues of mismanagement and low pay in esports media for quite some time. I also wrote about Upcomer before it kind of fully went down the tubes and was shipped off to Dot or to gamers. And after I wrote that, I got a deluge of people writing for all kinds of different websites who were like, okay, this guy is a reporter writing about this stuff. Let me just like come and vent to him about the issues I've experienced. And the overwhelming majority of the people who reached out to me were people who worked for Gamers properties. And Gamers is more than Dot. Gamers has all kinds of websites across both gaming and other forms of culture, anime, pop culture. And to some extent, I think that's also just a matter of statistics. Like Gamers is a really large network. It has a lot of freelancers in it. So if freelancers in this space are going to come to me to complain, probably a lot of them are going to be working for Gamers. But the fact of the matter is, I spoke to over a dozen former staff members across all kinds of different gamers properties, and they all had some pretty legitimate grievances with the way they'd been treated. These are full-time and freelance staff. So I think it's also worth saying that while you were focusing on freelance pay in what you were just saying, and I suppose my article was as well, it's not like the full-time pay for any of these jobs is that good either. So the article was broadly about low pay across the entire space and how that results in this sort of churn of writers who enter the space thinking maybe they can turn it into a full-time living or a career, realize that it's at best just a part-time job that must be supported by some other form of income, or
Mm,
having a partner or disability payments or something that can cover for what you're not making, for the lack of benefits and stuff.
mm,
um, and people just burn out, within a few years. A
yeah.
few of the writers, former writers who I spoke to, were people no longer working in esports media or who were looking to get outside of it, because they were young and they'd never had real jobs before. They went right from college into the esports workforce, and so they didn't even understand. It took them years to realize that the way they were being treated was not necessarily normal or
Mm,
fair. Um, and okay, I'm using the word fair here. I understand that is totally subjective based on what you were saying.
mm,
Billy, I think the point that you made when we spoke privately was that this is like the best that esports media can do. There just isn't that much of an audience for it. There's not that much traffic.
mm,
Monetization isn't that good.
yeah.
And so to some extent their hands are tied with these rates. And I would agree with that. All I mean, and we can talk about that more, but all I'll really say on that front is that, I'm a journalist. Like, my role here is to speak to the workers and report the real ways in which they feel like they are
Mm,
not being rewarded accurately for the work they're doing.
yeah.
Um, this larger
And
question of monetization and where the business is going in general is a really
mm,
interesting one. But to me, that's almost it's almost another story.
yeah.
These workers feel like they are being mistreated and not being paid well,
Hmm.
and they're getting burnt out on esports journalism, whether or not the businesses they're working for are profitable.
Mm, yeah. And I think, yeah, to be clear, I don't know the numbers of these sites in terms of, I mean, you can find how many clicks the site gets across the board. But in terms of like, revenue generated, and then I'm no financial expert, does that then equal X amount of pay is acceptable for, because I spoke to Kevin Morris, who's the
Mhm.
chief content officer at Gamers. Um, and yeah, he was saying like they want each site that they own to be self sufficient. And I think a lot of these sites are just more niche than people give them credit for, and I think that's
Mhm.
probably an issue across the board with esports. Um, and so yeah, how much can you really pay? And to be clear as well, I think your piece was very balanced. I think you approached it in a. My main issue or my main disagreement came with the discussion around it online afterwards. Like,
Mhm.
to me, I don't know what you think about this, Adam, but to me it was just funny and like kind of laughable that there were people like former full time staffers at Upcomer that were criticizing, and I get it. They anticipated a loss for like a period of time. I get that, but the fact that they were like criticizing the model of Gamers when Upcomer's just very nearly gone out of fucking business, and Gamers is the one that's just bankrolled it, just kind of saved it. Might be a push, but
No, saved it.
almost, yeah, well, yeah, rescued it from the dead, kind of. And so, yeah, former Upcomer staffers like criticizing Gamers model. For me, it was just like, well, you have to be realistic. Like, I get it. You want people to be paid well, and could people sustain a good full time wage on esports rates? Probably not. But then, is that what you consider fair, or is fair what you can return for an outlet?
Mhm.
And so, I don't
I,
know. I think it's more nuanced. Go on, Adam.
I was going to say, I can offer a little bit of insight into the former upcomer folks having a pop at Gamers, right? And it's less to do with them actually caring about what's going on at Gamers and more to do with the fact that they got like blasted by people such as myself early on because they were paying ridiculous rates before they even launched. And I was saying, this is not going to work. You're going to hire all these people. They're going to get used to a certain amount of money. Then you're going to crash and
Mm,
burn. It's invariable because you're not going to make enough money. And then people like George are going to go to other websites and say, no, I'm owed, I don't know, let's say 60K, where it's just not, it's not going to happen anywhere else. And if
mm,
people do, like publications do try and meet that, they're also just going to go the same way of Upcomer. So, like that, in a sense, in my mind, well, I know because Sean was DMing me having a cry. But effectively, he felt like Upcomer got the short end of the stick in terms of the conversation online. And then because I don't really tweet anymore, he thought people like myself were like almost unwilling to speak about dot and gamers as opposed to anything else. He thought like, oh, you were fine chatting shit about us, but not about other people. Which is just not true. I just didn't want to tweet, and then I was like, we might do a
Yeah.
video here, so like, I care more
Yeah,
about
and
giving
it also
my
sounds like
opinion
your
here.
critiques of both of the companies are just like entirely different critiques. So,
Hmm.
yeah, not super.
It was
I
just
don't
him
think
being
we need to
salty.
speak out about both. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
I agree with, by the way, with the fact that some of I'm familiar with some of the different salaries that people in various roles were being paid at Upcomer. I think
Hmm.
some of the higher level people were probably getting paid, the best salaries that anyone will ever get in esports
Yes.
journalism, based on what I
Yeah.
heard. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, like
Um,
$120,000 and like numbers like that. It's outrageous.
yeah, six figures, which
Hmm.
admittedly is pretty crazy. It's funny to me to see Upcomer and Dot sort of, sniping at each other like this, because I just think they both have problems. And the problem is just the way they monetize. This is less of a problem for Dot, because Dot is very effective at monetizing. Like, that's their whole business model, is snapping up these badly monetized sites and then cranking up the monetization.
Yeah.
But I still think that the way that they do that is sort of uncreative. I mean, it's through things like advertising, SEO. I'm every esports media business has its issues, but I'm more impressed by the way that Dexerto, for example, has really diversified its offerings and its products in order to, I think, monetize more effectively in a way that neither Upcomer or Gamer/Dot have done. Like, Dexerto, for example, has a whole brand consultancy side, which, as far as I can tell, was never really in the cards at Upcomer. So I agree that Upcomer was overpaying, but part of that to me is that Upcomer was just not, like, they didn't have a strategy in place that would justify paying those salaries in the present or in the future. Like, maybe if there was some thought that they could, do that sort of brand consultancy, maybe like run events, do job listings. I
Mm.
don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating, but there are other ways that esports media businesses can monetize,
Mhm.
and that I just don't think Upcomer was taking advantage of. So I agree that the salaries didn't make any sense, but
Mm.
I'd like to think that it is possible to build up an esports media business so that those salaries could make sense in the future. I don't know.
Mm.
I want to
Yeah.
hop in and say what is it that makes Dot's rates unfair? Because if people are reaching out to Dot and saying I want to write for you, then Dot say here's the amount we're willing to pay, and these young writers or even experienced writers are like, yeah, that sounds good to me. Like, what about that? Where in that process is someone truly getting fucked over? I know
I
there is
think,
an answer for it, but it's just in my
yeah,
mind. I'm like, if the people are willing to do it, and you can make a full time salary doing it, but they almost encourage you to just churn out as much shit as possible, right? So
Mm.
you can
Yeah.
make enough
Yeah.
money freelancing. Like I was writing for like 8 or 9 websites when I first started, and went from part time to full time in 3 months. Like I made it happen. I was working shit tons and it burn out in the future, blah blah blah, as he said at the beginning. But like, it's certainly you're able to do it. You're not really creating anything of worth too much
Mm.
in terms of like long lasting
yeah.
impact in actual journalism. But like, it can be done. But like, my thinking is just if young writers and experienced writers are willing to come in and work for that amount, what aspect of it is unfair? Is it just judging it and comparing it to other industries?
Part of it is comparing it to other industries, but I think there are a lot of flaws with just doing that, straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are a lot of logical issues with that. I have a couple of answers to this question. It's a great question. First of all, just anecdotally, uh, while you're right that they do sort of encourage people to churn out as much as they can, and by doing that, you can totally achieve something approaching a full-time wage. Um, I've heard horror stories about what that means for the work-life balance of these writers. Like,
Yes.
in order
Yes.
to achieve that kind of income and fully sustainably support
Yeah.
themselves with esports journalism, um, people are putting themselves, this is maybe a little sensationalist, but putting themselves in danger. And I have specific examples of
Mm-hmm.
that. I spoke to a former editor for Dot who basically reached out to me to complain about this exact issue, and gave some examples of writers who, okay, so for example, there was one Dot writer who worked so much that they were, I guess, working at some office, churned out like 12 articles in a day, and then were driving home and were so tired that they just like pulled over on the side of the road and were literally, this is the image that was given to me, like literally just like passed out in their car with their arm out the window, just like on the side of the road, to the point where like one of the editors caught wind that this was happening and actually had to like call emergency services to come help this person because they were like incoherent. um on top of that, like these, even for the people who aren't grinding out all the articles all the time and are essentially getting paid part-time wages, they are to some extent treated like full-time staffers because they're in this Slack channel where they're expected to constantly be paying attention to the pings that they're getting from editors.
That's a good point.
And if news happens, like one of them has to jump on it no matter what they're doing, otherwise they've failed as a team. And so like while maybe they're not writing enough articles to be paid full-time wages, like the mind share, just like the experience of working for the company requires them to be plugged into editorial at all times. And so that just kind of compounds on this burnout. So to me, like the real issue is just that it's literally whether or not these writers are willing to do this work, it's not sustainable for them in the long run. And it means like there is no pathway for dot writers to like actually truly build. Well, okay, I shouldn't say there's no pathway, because a lot of writers in this space came out of dot, and like writers who are working for more prominent national outlets. But I think the bottom line is, if you have this sort of burnout and constant churn at the lower level, it makes it a lot harder for for the next Richard Lewis or like the next Jacob Wolf to arise out of these spaces, because people are just like, they just get burnt out and they lose their passion for it instead.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an element of personal responsibility that we need to add, though. Like, I don't think Dot or any publication is saying, look, you have to work X amount, unless that's in the agreement. But when it's just those, like, you earn as much as you put in, effectively. Like, no one's forcing you to go full-time freelance in journalism. Like, you can have a part-time job and try and make it happen on the side, like part-time freelance writing, part-time at Starbucks or whatever, and grind up and try and build up that way. I know some people want the dream so bad they'll just go for it and take the leap as soon as possible. Like, it's effectively what I did. But I mean, they're the ones typically making that decision. I don't think the responsibility is necessarily on a Dot or a Deserto or anything at that point. So while I agree, like, especially with your second point about like there's an expectation of being around 24/7, even if you're not even a part-time worker, you just freelance. We all know that. But it's just as the personal responsibility angle, which I just want to add on, because you don't always have to go full in, and you are somewhat in control of your destiny. So like, I don't want to put all of the blame on one side.
No, honestly, that's a really good point. I totally agree with that. I guess my only response to that is that, like, I don't, we all know the average esports writer. I don't trust that person to be responsible enough to take care of themselves. Honestly, a lot of them are just like,
that's on them. Then.
They're overgrown teens. I guess it is on them to some extent, but
it's fully on them. If they can't look after themselves, that's on them, surely, man. Who else is it? Who else does it fall on?
I guess my take is that most people can't take care of themselves, like in the world. So it's not bad for there to be systems put in place to protect those people.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I don't disagree with what you're saying either. So
yeah.
I guess I think I probably fall more on the side of the personal responsibility stuff, which is probably where most of the disagreement between Alex and I came. Because I agree. I think when you're in the situation, like when I was in the situation, I used to freelance for Dot. And I remember, I wrote the first feature I wrote for Dot. Kevin edited it. It was probably 1,500 words. In fact, I think it was 1,500 words, so it's pretty long. I think I was paid like, he negotiated with me, thankfully, a little bit, which is crazy because I probably got paid like the maximum at the time. And it was like $55 or $50 or something, which now if I wrote something for 1,500 words worth of a piece and got paid fucking $50 for it, I'd scream. But I guess my point is, like, at the time, man, I guess I was just, my energy was focused towards figuring it out. Like you said, if you have to get a part-time job, or just doing it when it makes sense, doing it in your spare time if you want to try and build a journalism career whilst you're working a job. And I get it. a bastard that they don't pay well. Like now I write for outlets that pay so much fucking better than that, like literally 10 times that or more, which is mad. But I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Fuck, what was I just going to say?
I don't know, but it's definitely not Deserter that's paying you 10 times more than that.
Hey, no comment, son.
That's real.
No
But-
comment.
Yeah, I mean,
It is.
and I think you guys are right. Like, obviously, no one is entitled to just like jump into this industry feet first and get a full-time job and just like totally like there's no shame in working a part-time job in some other industry, to support yourself while you do this. That's when I was getting into freelance writing and esports, I had a full-time job in another industry that's and that's the only reason I was able to do it. So absolutely, I mean, I agree, but it's I do think that people like maybe this industry as a whole just needs to be more honest about that then, because I don't think that a lot of esports writers have that understanding. I think a lot of people think that you can get into this full time. They look at the sort of the people who have made it to some extent. People like Jacob, for example, who actually did kind of go into this full time very early on and then just has been doing that. And obviously that's not like the path that most people are going to take, but maybe there just needs to be more awareness of this then. So that writers like proactively will pursue other jobs.
To be fair, though, most outlets are pretty transparent about rates and stuff. Like I remember when I first went to Dot, basically the first thing they said is like, "We pay this for a feature. Is that okay or not?" So I think most of the time they are pretty transparent. Now, can they maybe make more of a song and dance about it so that writers know what they're getting into ahead of time if they have it on the website or whatever? That might be an option. But I guess this is what I was going to say before I remembered now. Is like, this is all true, and I appreciate that rates are low, but like, what's the solution? That's the only thing I think. Because if you see, maybe this is an extreme example, but Upcomer, they paid good rate, like good salaries and good rates according to like a Los Angeles fucking,
New
cost
York
of
media,
living and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and like, that's obviously not the solution. I think a lot of people, and I remember Adam predicting this like a few years ago. Like a lot of people predicted that Upcomer wouldn't work.
Easiest prediction ever, by the way. Is how
that's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's just my. I don't even.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah,
asking
I mean,
you
I have a
directly,
take
but,
on this.
Go on.
Although I want to say that I said at the top of this episode that I'm a journalist and not an economist, so this is spitballing, and I don't know what the true answer is. But one potential answer is to let your writers and employees maybe be a little more vested in the business in some way. I'm not saying to give them like shares necessarily, but like a profit share or something. Make it so that when the business as a whole benefits, so do the writers, and that gets them more invested in in their work as well. And maybe then you could even pay the same low rates, but then at the end of a quarter or something, if someone's articles have specifically helped build a business in some way, then you can kick it back to them somehow. I don't know what that would look like, but I just know that I don't think any esports media outlets do that right now. Most media outlets don't do it right now. We are starting to see the rise of employee-owned outlets, things like Defector, for example, in like the sports media space, which have made that work. Now, obviously, that is not something that's going to be attainable for like most freelancers who don't really have a following in esports. But that kind of spitballing. But yeah, one solution is just get the writers and employees more invested in some way. Allow them to benefit directly from the growth of the business itself. That's not something that happens at Dot right now, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Like I said, I agree. I don't know how it'd look, but I think something like that would be a good idea. Adam, do you have a take on that or no?
I just say we blow esports up.
Yeah, I actually agree.
That's the only real suggestion I have. No, I don't know what the answer is, or else I'd have been trying to fix it a long time ago if I knew what's what. And I think we discussed it in like our very first video, but like it's not even down to the people at this point. It's down to the publications to try and figure that stuff out, right?
Yeah.
No matter how hard you work, like you're not going to directly affect how they monetize, number one, and two, if they decide to give you a piece of the pie. But like I'm pretty sure we had like the CEO of Gamers Group like bragging about like how rich he was or something along those lines, or how successful he was in an article like the same week some shit went down like where he didn't look good. What is he like 26, 27? Which surprised me because I thought he looked like 42. But that's an aside. It's not relevant to the story at all, in fact. But
Honestly, I
that
didn't
surprised
realize
me.
he was that young either. Are you serious?
Yeah, I think he's like
Yeah,
26,
I didn't.
27. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god, you're right. He was 19 when he launched Gamers.
Yeah,
Okay.
working
Wow.
in esports
Wow.
ages you
Holy shit.
like a fucking grape, doesn't it? It's
For real.
not pleasant. But but I don't understand
Except for me,
why.
obviously.
Exactly, mate. You look 17. I don't know how old
Yeah.
you are, but
Exactly.
you're doing well. I'm actually 13 and I look 42. So, but no, I don't understand why the parent company of Dot would acquire Upcomer.
Do you know?
What's anyone have any theory as to why that makes sense?
Dude, I don't know why anyone ever acquired Upcomer. I don't know why Enthusiast acquired Upcomer. Like, it's not like
I
the
don't know
brand
why
has
you
that much
revived that
loyalty.
brand.
Yeah.
Just create a new brand at this point. Like,
Yeah.
especially now, like
Oh,
with what happened at Enthusiast, Upcomer feels like a cursed brand. I
Mhm.
agree. It makes no
Mm.
sense. I think the real answer is that Upcomer has, and this is outside my area of expertise, but like you have to imagine Upcomer has sort of like built up this base of SEO that allows it to show up on like Google searches a little more
yeah.
easily than a news
Mm.
site would. I think that's just what they're buying is like that
It,
sort
I
of
it
think.
like
used to do well on
SEO
Yu-Gi-Oh.
boost.
I know that. Like they were bragging just before like everyone got laid off. I remember like Phil was like, "We just broke so many records and all that kind of stuff." And I literally got access to their SEO dashboard, and it was just like Yu-Gi-Oh absolutely carrying the fuck out of them. Nothing to do with esports, but again, it's just like the
Hey,
best like
that's
the best example of esports media is like esports publications being completely carried by things that have got nothing to do with esports. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
That's
So
I mean,
it's not even an
you know,
esports issue.
that's all.
that's what happened to Dexerto, and to their credit, they're
Yeah.
very self aware about it. There,
Mm.
Very.
Yeah.
But I can't say any more than that. But yes,
Yeah,
I,
that's
I,
my ultimate. That's my bird's eye view take. Is it's just depressing, like the state of media. Not even in esports and gaming, the media across the board is like, yeah, I don't know, depressing, man.
yeah,
Like I said,
Adam, I
something like
fully
the Athletic
endorse.
is the best. But
Obviously, this podcast is like a shining beacon of what esports media could be. But besides this, I endorse the blow it all up plan. I
Mhm.
mean, that was really my takeaway from writing the article. Is that yeah, because I don't really have the solution either. My takeaway was, damn, this whole space is just fucked.
Messy.
Like
It's
that's
messy,
really
yeah.
it. So
yeah,
yeah, get out while you can.
yeah, yeah.
But that, like, do we have any advice to young writers who may be watching this, or like people who want to get into esports writing?
Oh my
But so
god.
beyond like, don't like that's my
I mean,
genuine thing. Like,
I mean,
honestly,
don't do it. But
after having this conversation, I'd say one is definitely just be more pragmatic about what it means to enter esports writing.
yes,
mm,
Pursue a part or full time job in another industry while you do it, so you can pay the bills.
yeah, yeah. That feels like one of the only options to me, for young people especially. Like if you've got no kind of foothold in journalism or in writing really, but you want to get into it, I think you can only really do it, yeah, if you've got another source of income. It's like
hmm
because you're not going to be able to write for or almost certainly you're not going to be able to write for the outlets that pay well, um, and most of them aren't even endemic to esports anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
can I give one piece of advice in that regard? Like, and this is what I did when I was freelancing, and I think I was only able to pursue this strategy because I had a full time job supporting me. But like, I mean, I wrote for basically all of the endemics at various times just to kind of get my feet wet. But at a certain point, I pivoted to just like focusing on really good stories that I could pitch to larger non-endemic outlets. They pay better. Like you can write one feature story for a magazine, and that will pay the equivalent of like 500 esports stories. And also,
yeah,
it's honestly just much more effective at getting your name in front of editors at outlets that also pay better.
mm,
So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be take the expertise you have on esports and take it outside the endemic esports space because again, this shit is fucked.
yeah. I agree with that
but
definitely.
would like a spreadsheet with salaries and rates like pulled together, anonymous sources of it, but where we
Ooh.
know what the rates are. Like obviously they have that in games quite a bit. so you can kind of break it down by tiers and all that kind of stuff. I think they're a lot more fleshed out in games in general. But
You should make
if
that
we could,
spreadsheet, Adam.
I'm not the person for it, but someone would maybe help the younger generation, at least educate them a little bit. If someone was to make it, I put the idea out in the marketplace, and now it's up for someone much more kind than me to make it happen. If it would
One
help.
thought on that, I love that idea. My only like niggling nervous thought on that is that this is such a small space that depending on what information was in the spreadsheet, you would know who it was. Like as soon as you saw enough info, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's that's Lewis's salary or like whatever. Not to add just like a random name, but yeah. So whoever does this, someone should do this, but just like if you do it, tread lightly with the information you ask people to divulge. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Like postcode, national insurance number,
blood type,
sort code. Yeah, exactly, all that stuff. Yeah, and then also don't tell me the publication, but how much do you get paid? Middle name and all that. Yeah, it's not something I'll do, to be honest, because I don't care about fixing the shit anymore. But Billy should do it since he loves doing that kind of stuff.
No,
be the hero that esports needs.
He loves the people.
Yeah. No, I don't. I couldn't give a toss. we're like we record an industry podcast, Adam, and we like two of the people that care the least. We're like two of the least fucking. Well, to be fair, you less so than me these days. I care somewhat. I've still got some life in me. I don't think you have at all.
Oh, none. I mean, I'm employed to work in gaming and esports, so I shouldn't say that. But like, no, I genuinely, if this industry blew up tomorrow, I'd be like, sound. I'm applying to Costa. I'm applying to Starbucks, and I'll between the two.
You know what I really want to see? I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I would love if the Athletic, I think I said this in like our first ever episode, I would love if the Athletic did an esports thing, like just hired one writer or two writers.
It's not going to happen.
No.
I was just hanging out with someone who works at the Athletic over the weekend, and I said this exact thing to him, and he was like, yeah, 100%, not going to happen. He was like, if we just fired a bunch of our combat sports staff, we're not going to pick up someone for esports. Sorry to be a downer, Billy.
Damn. Yeah, that's a shame because the Athletic is like the fucking... They really are the shining beacon of media.
Well, they could spin it off and call it the unathletics. The unathletic. And then
or the Cyberathletics,
right?
Oh, the Cyberathletics, yeah, fuck me.
Yeah, if they want
acquisition incoming.
Oh, God. Well, it's either them or the Saudis, isn't it? So, I mean,
the only
so many options. Come get us, Athletic. But for me, I've got nothing to add. I've had a sore throat, so I've not really said too much throughout the whole thing anyway. So it's kind of pointless me being here. But
mate. Come on, don't say that.
Great insight.
No, honestly,
Alex,
I thought
which is good.
No, I appreciated your more pragmatic perspective. I know I'm coming to this from a place of maybe a little more idealism than is possible, but it's at least worth looking at it from that perspective.
It's important to have that, though, isn't it? Definitely, it's important to have that perspective. So
I think it's nice to have some hope, but that's not something I can offer. So like having someone like yourself on definitely does help. Like if you went on this, then this would be an absolute train wreck of an episode. Like truly, because we'll get 3 minutes in and we'll be like, fuck it. Like what's the point?
I still feel like we got there at the end, so all good.
Yeah, but 30 minutes later, so we got a bit more content out of it at least. Have you got anything else, Billy, my friend? Or
I haven't. No, I haven't. Have you, Alex? Anything else to say?
No, that's all I got. Honestly, it's a real pleasure to be on here with you guys. I enjoy this kind of conversation. It's depressing, but like I don't know. Someone has to have the conversation. So
your article will be linked in the description. I will remember to do it, and if not, I will remember in a week's time when I notice that I haven't done it, and I will put it in then. So either way, it'll eventually be there. Because I'm pretty bad at that stuff as a rule, but
cool.
I think that's about it. This is our first video in over a month because we've been absolutely
slack.
We're going to try and get back to it, even though I've got days off coming up. But I haven't told Billy that yet. But we got to 200 subscribers. We've been so inactive, we've lost a couple. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, why has it gone down? Who is deciding to unsub? I don't think
Ollie Ring.
Nah, he's still subbed. Ollie's still subbed, I reckon. Can you check? Oh, no. Okay,
right, thank you, everyone.
Get off those elf pens. Right, thanks, everyone.